So we know John Wolford is going to play in the second pregame game of this. So we know John Wolford is going to play in the second preseason game of the season against the Texans. What should our expectations be? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Travis Rogers. You can follow me under that name on Twitter, on Instagram, wherever you want to check it out, at Travis Rogers. I also host not only Locked On Rams, but the Rams pre- and post-game show on their flagship station, ESPN 710. Right here in Los Angeles, and we will have the Texans and the Rams starting tonight. Pre-game show starts at 5 o'clock. Myself and Kirk Morrison will have all of that. We'll get you ready for the Rams game against the Texans at SoFi Stadium tonight. Kickoff is at 7 o'clock. And if you would like, immediately after that game, Kirk and I will be on the radio as well, ESPN 710, talking about everything that took place in Game 2 of the preseason. Now, we're under 3 weeks away from the start of the regular season. So we are in the home stretch. It's so interesting that this is like the least interesting time of the year and the most exciting time of the year simultaneously. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Rams. Put that little check mark, the little plus, whatever it is in your podcast feed, and check us out on Locked On Rams on YouTube as well. I want to talk a little bit about the NFC West and what we've seen with some of the other teams in the preseason so far, specifically the Niners and the Seattle Seahawks. We'll touch on the Arizona Cardinals as well, but getting to see the Seahawks last night, boy, oh boy, does that look like a hot mess. That's coming up in just a little bit. We'll talk about some guys that I'm anxious to see against the Texans. I'd like to see them take a little bit of a step forward. Guys that I think will make the team. I don't think that they're in any jeopardy of not making the squad, but can they play better than they did a week ago? I think that's important, kind of making that forward progress. We will talk about that as well. But let's start right here. Let's start with John Wolford getting the start tonight against the Houston Texans. But first, let me remind you that today's episode is brought to you by Elias. Their app lets you access team and player stats, head-to-head team comparisons. Give yourself the edge this NFL season. Find Elias Game Plan in the App Store or Play Store today. Okay, so John Wolford, right? It changed pretty quickly. It was, and let me back up even a little bit more here. You don't want to play in the preseason if you are a Los Angeles Ram. There is one, I think, exception to that rule, and that is if you are a rookie player and they want to see you against some NFL-like competition. I don't think it means anything other than they'd like to see you play a little NFL-style football. But if you are something other than a rookie player, it means that they're trying to figure out whether they want to use you or not. It means that they're trying to figure out whether or not you have a future in that organization, usually. That's why I thought it was interesting that they kind of did a 180 on John Wolford. John Wolford did not play in the opening game against the Chargers. Bryce Perkins played the entire game and played pretty well, I thought. Now we find out that Wolford is going to get the start against the Texans here in game number 2, and this is what Sean McVay had to say about that. I think these are valuable experience opportunities for a player like John, who we have a ton of confidence in, but he hasn't played a whole lot. He played against Arizona. He played a quarter against Seattle in those real game experiences. So you can't really substitute when you're able to get tackled, go out there and play with some of the other guys and operate in a situation where you want Matthew to be able to stay as healthy as possible. But if he did have to do something, we feel this would be the best opportunity for John to get in there, get into a rhythm and a routine. Yeah, okay. So I get it, and this is what I've been saying for really, a few months now, that Matthew Stafford's elbow is the story of the preseason. Matthew Stafford's health is the story of the preseason. We know Cooper Kupp's going to be good. We know Aaron Donald's going to be good. Andrew Whitworth's departure, obviously a story as well. Jalen Ramsey, we know, is going to be a good player. The question is Matthew Stafford's health. And in the event that his health becomes an issue to the point where he can't play, what's up next? And that apparently is John Wolford. So when they decided not to play him in preseason game number 1, it made sense. And that's going back to what we were talking about a minute ago. If they're not playing you, it means that you're good. We don't need to worry about whether or not you're up for this. You are part of our plans moving forward. Sit down. We got you, right? Well, now all of a sudden he's back in there. So why? Right. And we talked about this on yesterday's Locked On Rams. You need to subscribe to it every day so you're always up to speed and know what we're talking about around these parts. But could it be that he's competing? Possible. I don't think that Bryce Perkins is going to jump over him due to the fact that he maybe had a pretty good preseason game, or he had a good preseason game last year. But it could be, hey, this is a little closer than we thought. We need to keep this guy around. This guy being Bryce Perkins. Let's take a look. And it could just be as simple as what Sean McVay said. And I'll say something else that I say a lot on this show. Sean McVay tells the truth. Most football coaches obfuscate, they had misdirection, they tell half truths, they're vague, or sometimes they just flat out lie. Sean McVay doesn't really do that. If he's saying that they're making this decision because they want him to be prepared, I believe him. It's Occam's razor, right? The most obvious answer is usually the right one. It could just be exactly that. Hey, listen, he hasn't really played any football at all in over an entire season. Let's get him some real reps. He hasn't played a competitive game since the 2020 season, and he played about a quarter against the Seahawks. He played the week before that against the Arizona Cardinals, and he played okay. It could be as simple as, let's see what it looks like when someone's trying to hit him. Let's see what it looks like when someone's trying to cover the receivers and try to earn a job. Look, it's not going to be, Jalen Ramsey out there doing work. It's not going to be a situation like that. It's going to be a situation where a guy may be trying to make a team, but he's going to be competing like crazy. Let's put him out there and see what that looks like. I think that's probably the most logical explanation. But don't sleep on the idea that they want to see these two guys against the same people in the same level of competition and see who maybe looks a little bit better along the way. I mean, coaches love competition. They like real live competition, and that could certainly be a part of it as well. If John Wolford gets out of there and is pedestrian, right? And what I mean, he completes maybe a little bit more than half of his passes. Maybe he throws a touchdown. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he throws an interception. Maybe he doesn't. But something in those lines, he's fine. If he goes out there and lays an egg, well, I mean, he probably shouldn't do that. He should probably make sure that, because now all of a sudden those questions get a little bit louder. It's not an answer to the question, but the question it's also not an answer to the question. It's still, hey, do we know the better? No, not really. Let's keep doing this. Let's see what comes up next. Most important part of all this is, I keep taking away the more I talk about it. Let's make sure that Matthew Stafford's elbow is healthy and ready to go. All right, coming up next on Locked On Rams, I want to talk about who should take that step forward in the second preseason game of the year. We might talk a little bit more about the quarterbacks and one particular player on the offensive line. That is coming up next. Okay, look, if you are like most of us, you've been in a situation where you get a little tight with cash, right? The end of the week, the end of the month, and you don't quite have exactly what you need, and something has come up. You need to get to work. You need to put gas in the car. You need to fix the car. You need to take a trip. You know what these situations are, right? You're living check to check, and it can be hard to make ends meet. It can be incredibly stressful when that unexpected expense, a couple $100 pops up, and it's like, I don't have it. Now there's a solution. Dave can help you get out of a pinch when you really need it. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, fix the car, catch up on bills. You decide how you want to spend the money, and you can finally tackle those expenses that has been stressing you out, and you don't have to have any hangups about it at all. No interest, no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and you need some help, here's what you do. You download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking is provided by Evolve, member FDIC, and you in the future will thank the you right now. Thanks again for making Locked On Rams your first listen every day. However you play, get the latest NFL fantasy draft tips from Locked On Fantasy Football and Locked On Dynasty. Plus, starting August 22nd, we're bringing you your daily top 10 list for fantasy draft week. Locked On Fantasy Football and Locked On Dynasty, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so second preseason game coming up here in just a little bit. The Houston Texans are the next opponent. We are just inside 3 weeks from the start of the regular. It was 3 weeks ago on August 18th, or I should say 3 weeks away, August 18th. So we are just inside that 3-week mark, and it cannot get here fast enough. The preseason will have to satisfy with some of the little positional battles or roster battles, or just, do we have the right guy kind of battles. Are going to have to satisfy for the next couple of weeks. And I think one of the interesting things to look at against the Texans coming up here, preseason game number 2, pregame show starts at 5 o'clock West Coast time, ESPN 710 right here in Los Angeles, hosted by this guy right here, me, Travis Rogers, at Travis Rogers on Twitter. Is Logan Bruss. Logan Bruss was the Rams' first pick in the draft, not a first-round pick. He was their first pick because, of course, F them picks, as they say around Rams parts. So that is not something that you're going to see for a while. But he was their first pick. And in the opening game against the Chargers, he was okay. It wasn't terrible. It also wasn't great. And it also was a clear indicator that Coleman Shelton is going to be the starting right guard and should be the starting right guard. That does not mean that Logan Bruss will not get on the field this season. It does not mean that maybe at some point in the future that he isn't the starting right guard. Maybe that's some point during the 2022 season. Maybe that's at some point beyond the 2022 season. But it's important, I believe, that what he did last Saturday against the Chargers and what he is going to do this Friday night against the Houston Texans, that the second performance is noticeably better than the first. We don't have to go. I'll be a professor here for a second, a high school teacher, however you want to characterize it. I'd give Logan Bruss a C for his performance against the Chargers. It wasn't a disaster. He passed the test. He got a decent grade. He gets to advance to the next chapter in the book. But it's also not like you're fitting him for a valedictorian's cap. It's also not like you're going to pull him up in front of the class and say, okay, tell us how you did that. How did you know all the answers? It was, all right, you good enough for your first ever test, but let's make sure that we're ready to do better here on the second one. Most notably, just directly over his face. Right? Just directly, not necessarily in protection, not necessarily as far as scheming and everything, but that pressure that comes right at him, he seemed to struggle with that a little bit. It could have simply been something as easy as this is a new league. It moved a little bit faster than he thought it might, and he got caught on his heels a couple of times and got knocked on his you-know-what. It happens. Like even really good, long-tenured NFL players sometimes get knocked on their butts. It happens, right? It happened probably a little bit more than you would like to see from the guy that you used your first draft pick. So I would like to see him take a little bit of a step forward and say, okay, look, game 2 was better than game 1. If game 3 is better than game 2, then we're good. We don't need to worry about that at all, that he's putting in the work. He's doing the study. He's getting stronger. He's getting quicker. All of the things that you would like to see from a young player. So I think that that's something, maybe the thing to keep your eye on going into the game against Houston coming up here in not too long of a time. Number 2 is Bryce Perkins. We just spent some time talking about John Wolford. It's really interesting to see the range of analysis on how good of a player Bryce Perkins is. There is he's a third string quarterback. He's getting a lot of reps. He's playing against guys that are not going to be in the NFL, and he's doing an okay job, but this is not NFL football. And don't get too caught up in the hype of what you're seeing. Just because he led some nice drives, threw some nice passes, that does not mean that he's ready to step in and become an NFL backup, a number 1 backup or beyond. That's not what that means. Okay, fine. I don't think that's necessarily what it is, but I also don't think that this is true. Hey, This is a guy that if you just put him on a roster, he would be competing for a job. He could be a number 2 on half the teams in the league. He's just a season or two or some seasoning away from having a backup job. That if the Rams put him on the practice squad, somebody's going to snap him up and they're going to be a backup. He's going to be a backup quarterback somewhere else. And now the Rams are potentially down to what essentially would have been their 4th quarterback, because obviously Stafford's your starter, John Wolford's your number 2. But if Perkins gets picked up, you got to go find somebody to do quarterback duties in practice. There is a scenario that exists where that 3rd guy could have to play in a given situation. And now instead of having your 3rd guy, you got your 4th guy. So what's interesting, if he comes out there in the second half, what if he goes in that second half and throws a couple of touchdown passes? What if it looks really clean again? Did you watch, and this, I don't want to give away too much of what's coming up in the next little chunk of our podcast talking about the NFC West, but did you watch that Seattle Chicago game the other night, the preseason game that was on ESPN? It was terrible. Just awful. Got guys throwing it way out of bounds and guys throwing it to empty chunks of the field and guys turning the wrong way and dropping passes and passes being way off the mark. It was just bad football. It was really difficult to watch. The Rams do not play like that. And that's a testament to Sean McVay, like we've talked about before. It's a testament to that coaching staff that they get their guys going, but it's also a testament to Bryce Perkins. He's getting guys out of the huddle. He's getting them lined up. The ball's on time, on target. The team's moving. They had a drive to go score a touchdown to win the game, and they did it. Hit a guy. He hit Lance McCutcheon in the back of the end zone. Touchdown, win the game. Okay? That's not nothing. And if he can do that again, if he can look competent again, I don't know if he's going to make the Rams. I don't know if he can unseat John Wolford. I don't know if that question that we were talking about earlier gets a little bit louder. But I do think that he can earn a spot in the NFL. I really do. Whether that's with the Rams or somewhere else, if he goes out there in the preseason again and look at what you saw last night in Chicago and Seattle, you tell me whether or not Bryce Perkins is better than the guys that you saw out there. I don't think there's any question. Now, those other guys, they're not starting quarterbacks either, but I'm telling you, when you're looking for a second quarterback, I have a very hard time believing that if there are 64, real quarterback jobs in the NFL, that he's not one of those 64 guys. I think his performance tonight could tell us a lot about that. Okay, coming up next, as promised, we'll get into the NFC West and what we've seen so far in the preseason and what that might mean for the Rams in their division title defense. That's coming up next. So there's a lot of good stuff in the world, right? There's Rams football, there's sports, there's family, there's really good stuff. But as I'm sure you know, and I'm sure that you have experienced as well, sometimes you get some, curveballs thrown your way. Sometimes you get some stuff that's not super easy to navigate. Sometimes you get some stuff that's a little overwhelming, right? And you don't maybe have the right person to talk to. Maybe you're feeling like you're carrying it all yourself, and it's normal, right? It's just the way that it goes. But what can really help is having somebody to talk to and having a therapist to kind of work your way through this. I've experienced it. I've seen it firsthand, and it makes a huge difference. And this is why I want to talk to you about BetterHelp, right? It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people everywhere, right? You can schedule a weekly video or a phone session. You don't have to be on camera if you don't want to do it. You can describe exactly the sort of therapist that you want, and they're going to match you to a therapist with inside 48 hours. That is incredibly quick, and it's incredibly helpful. BetterHelp is a great way to invest in your own health. Visit their website, read the testimonials. You can go see it for yourself, and you can know how good it feels to start having that stuff out there. You talk about it, you're going to feel better. And they have a special listener offer for all of the Locked On listeners. You get 10% off of your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at betterhelp.com/lockedon. One more time, BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com/lockedon. All right, so as mentioned, we're about 3 weeks away from the start of the regular season. A little bit less for the Rams, a little bit more for the rest of the teams in the league. Of course, the Rams start 3 days ahead of everybody else. They get that first game as defending champs. By the way, how good is that going to be? How much fun is it going to be if you're lucky enough to go inside SoFi Stadium and see them drop the banner and throw the party and know that the entire NFL world is watching you right there, or even just watch it on TV. I've never been to one of those before. This will be my first experience being a part of one of those games, but I've watched them all on TV and they look absolutely incredible. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Once that ball's kicked off, the season starts, and all the stuff that happened last year, and now you have to get ready for what's coming up in the 2022 season. And you've heard me say it. You've heard every other football person ever say it is, the best way to get in the playoffs is win your division. You win your division, everything else kind of takes care of itself. So what's going on inside the NFC West? The Rams are obviously the favorites to win that division as the defending champs. But let's talk about each of the other three teams very quickly here and what we've seen so far. Let's start with who are probably going to be the Rams' most closest competition, and that is the San Francisco 49ers. The big question coming in is, what's Trey Lance going to look like? How is he going to play? How is he going to replace Jimmy Garoppolo? And will that San Francisco offense be a little bit more explosive than maybe it was under Jimmy G? Yeah, maybe, right? That he looked pretty good in that first preseason action. We'll see whether or not that translates to the regular season. But that first question mark and seeing camp and seeing film and all of those other things, like, yeah, okay, that looks like an NFL quarterback. And he needs to, right? They spent the third pick in the draft. They're going to have to release or trade or do something with Jimmy Garoppolo to get him down the line. And it's probably going to end up in his release because they're not carrying a $25 million backup quarterback. That's not going to happen. So what do? You better hit a home run or at least a nice solid double off the wall with Trey Lance. And so far, he looks pretty good. So I think the Niners are in a pretty good position right there. We know that defense is going to be good. We know Kyle Shanahan is going to do a good job. You know that you got Kittle and Debo and all, Bosa and these guys. They're going to make life pretty hard for the Rams. And it's just a bad matchup for the Rams. It's been a bad matchup for them since McVay and Shanahan started matching up in this. The 49ers have gotten the right end of that far more often than they haven't. The flip side is the Rams got the one that matters the most. All right, so that's San Francisco. Let's go to Arizona. Do you see where Kyler Murray called plays for them the other day? And in light of everything we know about Kyler Murray over the last couple of weeks, that didn't look great. Cliff Kingsbury said, I want him to know how hard it is to call these plays. Let's give him a chance to do it. It was like negative yardage, punt. Yeah, great. That's wonderful. Now, I get it. He's calling plays for guys that are probably not going to be in the league. I understand how it works. But not a great look for Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. And I don't care what anybody says. They could look however they want in the preseason until Murray's out there in, let's say, end of October, early November. I want to see how he is physically. I want to see how he is emotionally. I want to see how he is mentally, because that you need to do your homework clause that they put in and ultimately took out of his contract. That's going to haunt that guy for quite some time. That was a terrible decision by all parties involved. And I would not be shocked if that is a recurring theme throughout the season. And then lastly, the Seattle Seahawks. Oh my goodness, is that a bad football team? I watched a little bit of them against the Bears the other night. Oh boy. They not only are going to be the worst team in the NFC, they might be the worst team in the NFL. I mean, multiple 3-and-outs, and I get it. It's not their guys, but Pete Carroll teams don't look that bad very often. This was a team that looked overwhelmed. And everything we said about Sean McVay's team, that they're crisp, they're running plays, there's not all these, the Seahawks, the exact, it looked like they'd met each other in the parking lot 5 minutes before the game and said, all right, let's figure out what we're going to, okay, you go left, you go right, I'll just roll out. We'll make something up as it happens. What a disaster. So whether they're going to get that cleaned up, I can't imagine how. Whether or not they're going to finish in last place in the NFC West, I can't imagine how they wouldn't. Whether or not they're the last team or the worst team in the NFL, maybe. Which, ultimately for the Rams, having a couple of layups, having a couple of opportunities to win some games in the division when the rest of the division should be somewhere between not too bad to maybe pretty good in San Francisco's case. Having those and maybe having them clip somebody else along the way would not be a bad deal at all. All right, next preseason game is right around the corner. We'll have all of the analysis for you. That's coming up on the next edition of Locked On Rams. Thanks for making us your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Now make your second listen Locked On Fantasy Football. Find the intellectual fantasy expert Vinny Eiler, brings over 20 years of NFL experience and a unique angle to give you the moves that no one else has. Get ready for your fantasy draft with Locked On Fantasy Football. Till next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.